The black Mercedes exploded into Morrison's auto repair at breakneck speed. Brakes screamed. Smoke billowed from the crumpled hood. Sarah Brooks burst from the driver's seat, her designer suit torn and blood-stained, blonde hair wild with terror. "Help me, they're coming," she gasped, stumbling toward the weathered garage where autumn leaves danced in the October wind. 3 black SUVs materialized through the mist like phantoms. Doors slammed. Armed men emerged, moving with deadly precision through Millbrook's quiet Main Street. Jake Morrison stood frozen beside his pickup truck, wrench in oil-stained hands, flannel shirt marking him as just another small-town mechanic. But something shifted behind his brown eyes, something cold, something calculated. His gaze swept from the terrified woman to the approaching killers, measuring distances with surgical precision. "Get inside, now!" Jake's voice cut through the chaos. No longer the gentle drawl of a mechanic, but the razor-sharp command of someone far more dangerous. 2 hours earlier, the October sun had painted Millbrook's Main Street in shades of burnished gold and deep crimson. Jake Morrison was methodically closing down his auto repair shop, organizing tools with the obsessive precision of a man who understood that order often meant the difference between life and death. The weathered wooden sign above his garage read, "Morrison's Auto Repair," since 2015, but the military-grade organization of his workspace suggested experience far beyond fixing carburetors and changing oil. His flannel shirt was rolled up to reveal forearms marked by faded scars that spoke of violence survived, and his brown eyes carried the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen too much in places the world preferred to forget. Sarah Brooks had pulled into his station that afternoon in her pristine black Mercedes S-Class, the kind of luxury vehicle that turned heads in a town where Ford pickups and Chevy Suburbans ruled the roads. She wore a tailored gray Armani suit that probably cost more than most Millbrook residents made in 2 months. Her blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon that hadn't moved despite what appeared to be hours of driving. Diamond earrings caught the late afternoon light, and her Cartier watch gleamed against pale skin that suggested more time in boardrooms than sunshine. But beneath the polished corporate exterior, Jake's trained eye noticed telltale signs of stress that money couldn't hide. The way her manicured fingers drummed against the leather steering wheel in rapid, irregular patterns. How her blue eyes darted to the rearview mirror every 10 to 15 seconds, with the systematic attention of someone expecting pursuit. The slight tremor in her left hand when she thought no one was watching. "Fill her up, please," she had said, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. But there was something else layered beneath that confidence, a tremor that spoke of fear carefully controlled through sheer willpower. While Jake operated the pump, she stepped out of the vehicle to stretch, her movements fluid and graceful, despite the obvious tension that had settled between her shoulder blades, like a living thing. "Beautiful town you have here," she commented, but her gaze swept the surrounding streets with the systematic attention of someone checking sightlines and escape routes, rather than admiring small-town charm. Her positioning beside the car provided clear views of all approaching vehicles, while keeping the Mercedes between herself and the main road. Tactical awareness that had nothing to do with corporate training. Jake nodded slowly, studying her with the quiet intensity that most people mistook for small-town curiosity, but which was actually the professional assessment of a man trained to read threats and allies with equal precision. "Heading somewhere special?" he asked casually, noting how she positioned herself with instinctive awareness of cover and concealment. "Business or pleasure?" Sarah hesitated for exactly 2.5 seconds before answering, long enough for Jake to catalog the micro-expressions that flickered across her features as she calculated her response. "Business meeting at the Meadowbrook Inn," she said finally. "Defense consulting work, government contracts, you know how it is." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge, and Jake felt something stir in his chest, a recognition he hadn't experienced since his discharge from active duty. Her business card was cream-colored stock with elegant black script that read, Sinner Tech Solutions, Advanced Defense Systems, Sarah Brooks, Chief Executive Officer. But it was the government clearance indicators, printed in barely visible microtext along the bottom edge, that made Jake's pulse quicken with unwelcome memories. Her fingers lingered against his palm for just a moment when she handed it over, and their eyes met with an electric intensity that neither could quite explain or dismiss. "Call me if you ever need security consultation for your business," she said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but somehow managed to convey more warmth than her words alone could carry. Small towns like this often overlook vulnerabilities that more sophisticated threats might exploit. Jake pocketed the card carefully, watching as she climbed back into the Mercedes and drove away, noting the black Suburban that pulled out from behind Miller's Diner exactly 37 seconds after she passed. That had been 2 hours ago, when the afternoon was still golden and the most dangerous thing on Main Street was Mrs. Patterson's aggressive driving. Now, as armed men spread across his property with the coordinated precision of a military operation, Jake understood that Sarah Brooks had been running for her life when she found sanctuary at his garage. The cosmic irony wasn't lost on him. In a town of 3,000 peaceful residents, a woman fleeing professional killers had sought refuge with the one man who might actually possess the skills necessary to keep her alive. Jake slammed his fist against the garage door button and grabbed Sarah's wrist, pulling her into the shop with movements that spoke of tactical training honed through years of life-or-death scenarios. "Stay down behind that tool chest and don't move unless I give you a direct order," he commanded, his voice completely transformed from the gentle mechanic who had served her coffee and asked about her day just hours before. "Do you understand me?" Sarah's eyes widened as she took in the sudden transformation, the way he moved with predatory grace through familial territory, how his entire demeanor had shifted from small-town friendliness to lethal competence in the space of a heartbeat. "Who are you?" she whispered. But Jake was already moving, his tactical mind cataloging weapons and defensive positions with the automatic efficiency of a professional soldier. The first gunman kicked through the side door with military precision, his assault rifle sweeping the interior of the garage in textbook-clearing patterns. But he was entering Jake's domain, and every square inch had been unconsciously organized for defensive advantage. Jake dove behind the hydraulic lift, pulling Sarah with him as bullets sparked off metal and concrete, the familiar sound of incoming fire triggering muscle memory that had been dormant for years. The acetylene torch became an improvised flamethrower in Jake's hands, the blue flag flame forcing the intruders to take cover behind a damaged pickup truck while he maneuvered Sarah toward the reinforced back office. "Stay behind me and keep your head down," he ordered, noting how she followed instructions with the quick compliance of someone accustomed to high-stress situations. "When I tell you to move, you move fast and don't look back." "This doesn't make sense," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling, as Jake systematically dismantled the first attacker with precision strikes designed to incapacitate without killing. Military police training that emphasized control and restraint even in combat situations. The man dropped unconscious to the concrete floor, his weapon clattering away as Jake swept it beyond reach with practiced efficiency. The second gunman tried to flank them through the office entrance, but Jake anticipated the maneuver, using a hydraulic jack handle to disarm him before applying a sleeper hold that dropped the intruder in less than 10 seconds. 2 down, 1 retreating, toward the vehicles while shouting coordinates into his radio. Information that told Jake this was just the first wave of a larger operation. "You're bleeding," Jake said quietly, kneeling beside Sarah to examine the cut on her temple with hands that were surprisingly gentle despite the violence they had just witnessed. His touch was professional but somehow comforting, the steadiness of someone accustomed to treating combat injuries under fire. "It's not serious, but we need to get it cleaned before infection sets in." Sarah stared at the unconscious men scattered across the garage floor, her mind struggling to process what she had just witnessed. "You're not just a mechanic," she said finally, the statement carrying more weight than a question. Jake's smile was grim as he secured weapons and checked the perimeter through grimy windows that suddenly seemed far too exposed. "And you're not just a defense consultant," he replied, noting the tactical awareness in her positioning even while injured and disoriented. The way she instinctively stayed in cover, how her eyes tracked potential threats, the calm efficiency with which she assessed their situation. All behaviors that suggested training far beyond corporate boardrooms and Pentagon briefings. The sound of approaching sirens filled the October air as concerned neighbors called in reports of gunfire in their normally peaceful community. Jake helped Sarah to her feet, supporting her weight while maintaining awareness of all potential approach routes. "We need a story that doesn't involve federal agencies or classified projects," he said quietly, his tactical mind already working through the implications of police involvement. "Road rage incident," Sarah suggested without hesitation, her recovery time impressive for someone supposedly unfamiliar with violence. "Aggressive drivers followed me from the highway. Things escalated when they tried to force me off the road." Jake nodded approvingly. The story was simple, believable, and would satisfy local law enforcement without triggering federal interest. 8-year-old Lily Morrison burst through the back entrance just as the first police cruiser rounded the corner, her pink backpack bouncing as she ran toward her father with the fearless enthusiasm of a child who had never known real danger. "Daddy, I heard those loud noises again," she called out, completely unfazed by the scattered debris and unconscious intruders decorating the garage floor. Jake's entire demeanor transformed as he swept his daughter into his arms, the lethal operative disappearing behind the mask of a loving father in the space of a heartbeat. "Just some equipment malfunctioning, sweetheart," he said softly, but Lily's knowing 8-year-old expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced by the explanation. Her dark eyes, so much like her father's, surveyed the scene with an intelligence that was both endearing and slightly unsettling. "Is this lady hurt?" Lily asked with the direct curiosity of childhood, studying Sarah with frank interest. "She has blood on her face." Without waiting for permission, she dug through her backpack and produced a small first aid kit, with the efficiency of someone who had been taught emergency preparedness as a basic life skill. "Daddy taught me how to clean cuts and stuff." Detective Ray Martinez arrived with backup units, surveying the scene with the experienced eye of a 15-year veteran who had seen enough domestic disputes, bar fights, and random violence to recognize when something didn't fit the usual patterns. The damage was too controlled, too precise. The injured men bore the marks of professional restraint rather than desperate civilian self-defense. "Ma'am, these individuals were armed with military-grade assault weapons," he observed, photographing the sophisticated equipment scattered across the garage floor while noting the strategic positioning of the unconscious attackers. "That's quite an escalation for a simple traffic dispute. Are you certain there wasn't more to this incident?" Sarah maintained her composure with the practiced skill of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations and hostile congressional hearings. "Detective, I develop advanced defense systems for government contracts," she explained, her voice steady despite the circumstances and the blood still trickling from her temple. "Unfortunately, my work sometimes attracts unwanted attention from foreign intelligence services and industrial espionage operations." The explanation carried enough truth to be convincing, while avoiding details that would complicate their situation. Detective Martinez nodded slowly, recognizing the implications of her statement, while understanding the limits of his jurisdiction when federal security issues were involved. "I'll need to file a report, but I suspect this will be transferred to federal authorities within 24 hours. Jake remained mostly silent during the questioning, letting Sarah take the lead in their carefully constructed narrative while keeping Lily close to his side. When Martinez asked about his response to the attack, Jake's answer was simple and direct. Navy SEAL training doesn't just disappear because you change careers, he said quietly. When someone threatens my family, old habits tend to resurface, whether I want them to or not. As paramedics checked Sarah's injuries and crime scene technicians processed evidence, she found herself studying Jake with new understanding. The gentle mechanic who had served her coffee and asked about her travels had revealed himself to be someone capable of neutralizing multiple armed attackers without breaking a sweat or losing his temper. More intriguingly, his young daughter seemed completely unfazed by the violence, suggesting this wasn't the first time their peaceful existence had been disrupted by echoes from Jake's classified past. Lily chattered easily with Sarah while the adults handled official business, showing off her coding projects on a tablet with the infectious enthusiasm of a child who viewed technology as an endless source of magic and possibility. "Daddy taught me about programming languages before he taught me to ride a bicycle," she announced proudly, her small fingers dancing across the screen with impressive dexterity. Says, "Understanding computers is like learning to speak with the future." "Your mommy must be very proud of how smart you are," Sarah said gently, genuinely charmed by the little girl's intelligence and curiosity. Lily's expression grew solemn with the sudden gravity that children display when discussing subjects too large for their understanding. "Mommy's in heaven now," she replied matter-of-factly. "She died in a car accident when I was 5 years old, but Daddy takes really, really good care of me, and he says Mommy would be proud of both of us." The simple statement hit Sarah with unexpected force, creating a hollow ache in her chest as she looked at Jake with new understanding of the weight he carried every single day. Single parenthood in a dangerous world, protecting a daughter who had already lost one parent, while carrying secrets that could destroy what remained of their peaceful life together. As the police finished their investigation and the last ambulance pulled away into the gathering dusk, an uncomfortable silence settled over the garage-like fog rolling in from the Connecticut River. Sarah knew she couldn't simply climb into her damaged Mercedes and pretend none of this had happened, but she also recognized that her presence had brought lethal danger to this man and his innocent daughter. "I should leave town tonight," she said quietly, gathering her purse and checking her phone for messages that would undoubtedly require immediate attention. "These people won't give up, and staying here puts you and Lily at risk." But Jake shook his head with the quiet certainty of someone who understood tactical realities better than corporate risk assessment. "It's not safe for you to travel alone," he replied, his mind already working through the implications and analyzing potential threats. "They'll be back with more personnel and better intelligence. Running now just makes you an easier target." The professional assessment was delivered without emotion, but Sarah could hear the underlying concern that suggested his interest went beyond simple civic duty. The phone calls started almost immediately after the police departed. Synertech board members demanding detailed explanations, Pentagon officials requiring security briefings, FBI counterintelligence agents needing threat assessments. With each conversation, Jake learned more about Sarah's world, and none of it provided any reassurance about their situation or her safety. Project Nightfall wasn't just another lucrative defense contract. It was a revolutionary AI surveillance system that could fundamentally alter both military reconnaissance and civilian monitoring capabilities. The kind of technology that made governments topple and people disappear permanently when they became inconvenient to powerful interests. Sarah's involvement went far deeper than any corporate executive should possess, her knowledge of technical specifications suggesting hands-on development experience that didn't match her official biography. "You built this system yourself, didn't you?" Jake asked quietly during a brief pause between crisis calls. Sarah's hesitation lasted exactly long enough to confirm his suspicions before she deflected with corporate speak about team collaboration and research partnerships. But her unconscious use of military terminology and her instinctive awareness of operational security protocols told a different story entirely. That evening, as Lily helped Sarah apply ice to her injuries while Jake prepared a simple dinner of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, the unlikely trio settled into a domestic routine that felt surprisingly natural despite the circumstances. Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks, watching Jake move around the kitchen with the same methodical precision he applied to everything else in his carefully ordered life. "You don't have to babysit me," she said quietly, but Jake's response carried undertones that had nothing to do with tactical necessity. "I don't have anywhere else I'd rather be," he replied, and the simple honesty of the statement created an intimacy that neither had expected. Lily fell asleep against Sarah's shoulder while they watched an old movie, and Sarah found herself thinking about paths not taken and choices that had led her to this moment. Jake's laptop sat open on the coffee table, and Sarah couldn't help but notice the military-grade encryption software running silently in the background, programs she recognized from her own classified work. "Staying in touch with old teammates?" she asked casually, noting the secure communication protocols that suggested ongoing relationships with people who didn't officially exist. "Making sure old enemies stay buried where they belong," Jake replied, and something in his tone made Sarah's blood run cold, with the recognition that his past contained threats she couldn't begin to imagine. She was beginning to understand that Jake Morrison was far more than a small-town mechanic trying to escape memories of foreign wars and classified operations. The breakthrough came during what seemed like an innocent phone call that Sarah took in the kitchen while Jake helped Lily with homework. His enhanced hearing, a skill honed through years of tactical operations, where missing whispered conversations could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure, caught fragments that made his chest tighten with unwelcome recognition. "Yes, Colonel Chen," Sarah was saying, her voice tight with barely controlled stress. "The situation has been contained for now. Morrison is handling local security arrangements." "No, sir. There's been no compromise of operational details." "Understood completely, sir." The name hit Jake like a physical blow, dragging him back to memories he had spent years trying to forget through alcohol, therapy, and sheer determination. Afghanistan, 2017. Operation Valkyrie. 4 good men dead because Colonel Robert Chen had prioritized political considerations over soldiers' lives and mission parameters. Jake's hands began to shake as the memories flooded back with vivid clarity. The abandoned warehouse where they had tracked their target, the extraction helicopters that never came, the impossible choice between saving his team and completing an operation that had somehow become more important than American lives. He had saved the asset that night, a deep-cover CIA operative whose identity was so highly classified that Jake never learned their real name or operational background. But his teammates, Rodriguez, Thompson, Mitchell, and Kowalski, had paid the ultimate price for Colonel Chen's strategic calculations. 4 flags on 4 coffins because politics mattered more than the lives of the men who actually did the fighting and dying. And Sarah returned to find Jake staring into space, his face pale and haunted by memories that refused to stay buried no matter how hard he tried to build a normal life. "You mentioned Colonel Chen," he said quietly, his voice barely controlled as adrenaline and old rage fought for dominance in his system. "Tell me about your relationship with him." Sarah's expression shifted subtly, wariness replacing the comfortable intimacy they had been building throughout the evening. "He's been my mentor and father figure since I was very young," she said carefully, her word choice suggesting a relationship that went beyond simple professional guidance. Colonel Chen has been part of my life since college, helping guide my career and supporting Synertech's development." The explanation was polished but deliberately vague, and Jake's tactical mind immediately began identifying the gaps and inconsistencies. "Tell me about your childhood," he said, the request carrying more weight than casual conversation. "Your family, where you grew up, what made you interested in defense technology?" Sarah's narrative was smooth and professional, but Jake noticed the places where details were missing or didn't quite align with the woman sitting in his living room. Adoption after a family tragedy when she was young, Chen's guidance through college and her early career, the development of Synertech as a family business built on military connections and government contracts. But there were no specific dates, no names of schools or friends, no stories that carried the emotional weight of genuine memories. When Sarah excused herself to take another urgent call from Washington, Jake accessed databases he wasn't supposed to have clearance for anymore. Contacts and passwords that should have been deactivated years ago, but somehow remained active in the shadowy world of classified operations. What he found in the CIA personnel files made his blood freeze with the terrible certainty of a puzzle piece falling into place. Lisa Park, CIA operative, missing in action during Operation Valkyrie in Afghanistan. Official status: killed in action, body never recovered. But Jake remembered that night differently. He remembered saving someone, carrying an unconscious woman through enemy fire to the extraction point that never materialized. He remembered delivering her to military medical personnel before returning for his team, only to find them already dead from injuries that could have been treated if the extraction had come as scheduled. The pieces fell into place with devastating clarity that left Jake feeling sick and angry and betrayed all over again. Sarah Brooks was Lisa Park, the asset he had saved 5 years ago at the cost of his brother's lives. Colonel Chen hadn't lost her during the operation. He had stolen her, using her memory loss and trauma to create a new identity that served his purposes perfectly. Synertech wasn't Sarah's company. It was Chen's weapon, and Sarah was his unwitting accomplice in selling American defense secrets to foreign governments and private interests willing to pay premium prices for cutting-edge military technology. The woman he was falling for was both victim and perpetrator in a conspiracy that had cost his teammates their lives. Jake's secure phone buzzed with an encrypted message that made his blood run cold. Asset location confirmed. Retrieve package for termination or eliminate in place. Authorization Tango 77 Alpha. The kill order had come directly from Colonel Chen, and Jake realized with horrible clarity that he was being used again, manipulated by the same man who had sacrificed his team for political expedience. Chen had orchestrated Sarah's appearance at his garage, knowing that Jake's protective instincts and sense of honor would lead him to secure the asset until retrieval could be arranged. Now Chen expected him to deliver Sarah for permanent elimination. Just another soldier following orders, without question or conscience. The colonel had turned Jake into an unwitting accomplice in what amounted to the execution of the woman he had risked everything to save years before. The sound of multiple vehicles approaching through the October darkness broke through Jake's revelations. Through the kitchen window, he could see the unmistakable silhouettes of military vehicles, moving with tactical precision, their lights cutting through the darkness like the eyes of hunting predators. Chen had come for Sarah personally, and Jake faced the same impossible choice he had confronted in Afghanistan: follow orders and live with the consequences, or protect an innocent person and face the wrath of enemies more powerful than any individual soldier. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale as she recognized the implications of the approaching convoy and understood that her time had finally run out. "That's Colonel Chen," she whispered, her voice heavy with resignation that broke Jake's heart. "I won't let you and Lily get hurt because of my problems. This has to end tonight." She moved toward the front door with the determined gait of someone walking toward their own execution, but Jake caught her arm with gentle firmness. "Not this time," he said quietly, his decision crystallizing with the absolute certainty of a man who had finally found something worth fighting for, regardless of the personal cost. "5 years ago I saved you from that bastard and lost my brothers because of his politics. I won't let him have you now." Sarah's eyes widened as the full implication of his words penetrated her consciousness. "Afghanistan," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "You were there. You were the one who carried me out." The memories came flooding back in fragments, strong arms lifting her through gunfire, a voice telling her she was safe even as explosions lit up the night, the feeling of absolute security even as chaos erupted around them. Jake had been her guardian angel, the faceless hero who had pulled her from certain death, only to have that rescue perverted into something twisted and ugly by Chen's manipulation and political maneuvering. The man she was falling for had already saved her life once, and now she understood why his touch felt familiar, why his presence made her feel safer than any security detail or classified facility. Colonel Chen's amplified voice echoed across the property through a military-grade loudspeaker system. "Sergeant Morrison, you have something that belongs to the United States government. Return the asset immediately, and your record of insubordination will be overlooked. You have 60 seconds to comply before we consider you a hostile combatant." The formal tone carried the weight of absolute authority backed by overwhelming firepower. But Jake had moved beyond caring about military protocol or career consequences. He activated emergency protocols he had hoped never to use, guiding Lily to the reinforced safe room he had built in the basement, a father's paranoid preparation for threats that most parents never imagined. "Daddy's got to take care of some very bad men," he told his daughter, his voice gentle despite the circumstances, and the automatic weapons being deployed outside their home. "Remember what we practiced for situations like this?" Lily nodded solemnly, understanding that this was one of the scenarios they had rehearsed countless times over the years. "Stay hidden until you hear the all-clear signal," she repeated dutifully, her young voice steady despite the fear in her dark eyes. "And if something happens to you, I call Uncle Marcus and use the emergency code words we practiced." Jake kissed her forehead, wondering if this would be the last time he saw his daughter alive. The confrontation erupted with the controlled violence of a professional military operation. Chen's soldiers moved with tactical precision honed through years of classified operations, but they were facing a man who knew every inch of his territory and had absolutely nothing left to lose, except the people he loved most in the world. Jake used the garage's layout to maximum advantage, turning familiar tools into improvised weapons and using the building's structure to create choke points that neutralized his opponent's numerical superiority. Every piece of equipment became part of his defensive strategy. Hydraulic lifts provided cover, scattered tools became projectiles, and oil spills created treacherous footing for attackers unfamiliar with the terrain. Sarah fought alongside him with increasing skill as muscle memory from her CIA training reasserted itself despite years of suppression and psychological conditioning. They moved together with intuitive coordination that spoke of shared trauma and absolute trust, each protecting the other's vulnerable moments as they systematically dismantled Chen's assault team through superior tactics and desperate determination. But Chen had anticipated resistance and planned accordingly. The explosion that rocked the garage was precisely calculated to incapacitate rather than kill. Chen still needed Sarah alive for interrogation and intelligence extraction before her final elimination. Jake found himself pinned under debris, blood streaming from a severe head wound, as Chen's remaining soldiers surrounded their position with professional efficiency. "Enough of this theatrical resistance," Chen commanded, his voice cutting through the smoke and chaos with the cold authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. The asset will come with me immediately, and Morrison will face court-martial for treason and violation of direct orders from superior officers. Sarah looked at Jake's motionless form and felt something fundamental break inside her chest. This man had saved her twice now, and both times he had paid a terrible price for his heroism and moral courage. "I'll go with you voluntarily," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of absolute decision. "But you leave them completely alone. Jake and Lily have suffered enough because of your political games and manipulation." Chen's smile was cold and utterly without humanity as his soldiers secured Sarah with professional restraints. "The asset doesn't negotiate terms or conditions," he said, with clinical detachment that reduced her to equipment rather than a human being. "You're a weapon, not a person, and weapons don't have feelings or opinions about their deployment." As they dragged her toward the waiting vehicles, Sarah caught one last glimpse of Jake, unconscious and bleeding among the wreckage of the peaceful life he had tried to build for himself and his daughter. She had brought destruction to the one place that had felt like home, and now the man who loved her would pay the price for her presence in his world. But Jake Morrison had survived worse odds than this through sheer determination and tactical excellence. As consciousness returned with painful clarity, his mind immediately assessed the situation with professional detachment. Lily was safe in the reinforced bunker, Sarah was gone but likely still alive, and Chen had made the fundamental mistake of underestimating a man with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. Jake activated the emergency beacon hidden in his old dog tags, the same tags that had been around Sarah's neck during their escape from Afghanistan, the tags she still wore without understanding their significance or the memories they represented. The signal would bring help, but more importantly, it would allow him to track her location through the GPS transponder she unknowingly carried. The chase led through the Connecticut countryside, Jake's modified pickup truck matching pace with Chen's convoy while staying just outside their detection range. His military contacts provided satellite intelligence and tactical support, old debts being called in by men who understood the sacred nature of protecting brothers in arms and innocent civilians caught in the crossfire of classified operations. Chen had made enemies throughout his career of political manipulation and strategic betrayal, and many of them were eager to see him face justice for crimes that had been covered up by classification levels and national security concerns. The rescue operation became a reckoning, years in the making. Sarah's CIA training reasserted itself gradually as her memories returned in vivid, painful flashes during the rough transport to Chen's private facility. She remembered Jake's face during the extraction, the gentle way he had checked her injuries even as bullets flew around them like deadly rain. She remembered the promise in his eyes, that he would keep her safe no matter what the personal cost might be. Chen had stolen those memories from her through drugs and psychological manipulation, but he couldn't steal the fundamental connection that had formed between them during those desperate moments in Afghanistan. The bond had survived amnesia, false identity, and years of separation because it was built on something deeper than memory, the recognition of shared courage and moral integrity. The final confrontation took place at Shen's private compound in the Berkshire Mountains, a fortress designed to keep enemies out, but equally effective at keeping prisoners trapped within its reinforced walls. Jake's assault was surgical in its precision, each move calculated to minimize collateral damage while maximizing tactical advantage and the element of surprise. He had learned hard lessons from Afghanistan. This time, he wouldn't lose anyone who mattered to him, and he wouldn't trust anyone else to do what needed to be done. This was personal in ways that went beyond military duty or patriotic obligation. Sarah freed herself during the chaos of Jake's infiltration, her recovered memories providing the technical skills necessary to bypass security systems and navigate the compound's defensive measures. When she and Jake finally faced Chen together in his command center, it was with the united front of two people who had found their way back to each other, despite impossible odds and deliberate manipulation. "You can't possibly win this confrontation," Chen snarled, his composure finally cracking under the pressure of his carefully constructed world collapsing around him. "I have resources you can't imagine, connections that reach to the highest levels of government and military command. You're just one soldier and one compromised asset." But Jake and Sarah had something Chen had never understood, despite his years of studying human psychology and behavioral manipulation. The power of genuine human connection, forged in crisis and tempered by shared sacrifice. Love that had survived amnesia, betrayal, and systematic attempts at destruction. The FBI arrived to find Chen's entire operation thoroughly dismantled. His network of corruption exposed by evidence that Sarah had been secretly gathering for months while playing the role of dutiful corporate executive. Her memory loss had been partially fabricated, a desperate gambit to buy time while she built an airtight case against the man who had manipulated her entire adult life. 3 months later, Millbrook had settled back into its peaceful rhythm, but Morrison's auto repair had expanded significantly to include security consulting and risk assessment on its newly painted sign. Sarah had relocated Synertech's headquarters to a converted warehouse on Main Street, bringing high-technology jobs and federal contracts to a town that had never seen anything more sophisticated than seasonal traffic lights. Christmas morning found them in Jake's expanded kitchen, flour dusting every available surface as they attempted to create the perfect pancake breakfast for their first holiday as an official family. Sarah's culinary skills were steadily improving, but her academic approach to cooking still produced mixed results that provided endless entertainment for her new family. Lily provided running commentary on their technique while simultaneously building an elaborate gingerbread house that demonstrated engineering principles impressive enough to earn approval from her stepmother's former Pentagon contacts. The transition to having a mother figure had been surprisingly smooth, perhaps because Sarah approached parenting with the same methodical precision she applied to everything else. The dog tags hung from their Christmas tree like sacred ornaments, Jake's original tags bearing witness to sacrifice and survival, alongside new ones that Sarah had crafted for their reconstituted family. Jake Morrison, father and protector, matched perfectly with Sarah Morrison, wife and warrior, while Lily's contribution read, Lily Morrison, daughter and future world changer. As snow fell softly outside their kitchen window, Jake wrapped his arms around Sarah while they watched Lily explain quantum computing principles to her new tablet, while wearing pajamas covered in cartoon unicorns. The past would always be part of them, but it no longer defined their future or limited their possibilities. They had built something beautiful and lasting from the wreckage of their previous lives. A family forged in fire and strengthened by the kind of love that could survive anything the world might throw at them. The scars remained, but they had become part of the story rather than the ending. "Any regrets about leaving the corporate world behind?" Jake asked quietly, his lips brushing against Sarah's ear as she leaned back against his chest and watched their daughter plan world domination through technology and determination. Sarah smiled, turning in his arms to meet his kiss as morning light painted their future in shades of gold and infinite promise. "Only that it took us so long to find our way back to each other," she replied softly. "But maybe some things are worth waiting for,"